You ever notice how some people cancel plans and immediately feel relief? Not guilt, relief. The second the message is sent, their shoulders relax, their breathing slows down, and suddenly the world feels quiet again. And people call them antisocial for that. But honestly, some people don't hate being around others. They just hate who they become around others. It's 9:47 p.m. The room is dark except for the soft light from a laptop screen. Outside, cars pass by every few seconds. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. And inside this tiny room, someone is finally at peace. No pretending, no performing, no forced smiling. Just silence. And for some people, that silence feels safer than the outside world. Because home isn't just a place. Psychologically, it becomes emotional protection, a controlled environment. At home, nobody is judging your face. Nobody expects energy from you. Nobody interrupts your thoughts. Nobody forces conversation. You can finally let your nervous system unclench. And after enough stressful social experiences, the brain slowly starts associating home with recovery. The outside world feels unpredictable. Home feels manageable. Now this part is important. Not everyone who stays home is introverted. Some of them are actually socially skilled, funny, charming, confident even. But socializing drains them in ways people don't see, because there's a hidden psychological cost to being around people. Monitoring reactions, choosing words carefully, maintaining eye contact, matching energy levels, filtering thoughts. Most people don't even realize they're doing this, but some people feel every second of it, especially highly self-aware people, or people who grew up being judged constantly. They become hyper-aware of themselves, so even simple conversations can feel mentally exhausting. And eventually, home becomes the one place where they don't have to monitor themselves. Modern life is overstimulating. Notifications, crowds, traffic, algorithms, opinions, pressure. The human brain was not designed for this much noise, and some people feel that more intensely than others. You'll notice it in tiny ways. They sit in their car for a few minutes before going inside. They need silence after social events. They disappear for days after emotionally draining interactions, not because they hate people, but because their brain needs space to process everything. Home becomes that processing space, the emotional equivalent of taking armor off after a battle. But here's where it gets deeper. Sometimes people don't learn to love staying home naturally. Sometimes they learn it through disappointment. Maybe they trusted the wrong people. Maybe they felt misunderstood for years. Maybe they were criticized so often that being alone eventually felt safer than being vulnerable. And slowly, their brain starts associating people with emotional risk. The risk of rejection, embarrassment, exhaustion, abandonment, betrayal. So home becomes more than comfort. It becomes control. And psychologically, control feels safe. One thing people misunderstand about homebodies is that they think these people are doing nothing. But internally, their mind is usually very active, thinking, reflecting, imagining, overanalyzing, replaying conversations from 3 years ago at 2 a.m. Lots of people who love staying home have incredibly rich inner worlds. That's why they can spend hours listening to music, watching rain hit the window, journaling random thoughts, or just staring at the ceiling in silence, because their stimulation comes internally, not externally. And sometimes, their inner world feels more emotionally meaningful than reality itself. But there is also a darker side people rarely talk about, because isolation can quietly become avoidance. At first, staying home feels peaceful. Then slowly, it becomes harder to leave. Texts start feeling overwhelming. Plans feel exhausting. The outside world starts feeling emotionally distant. And over time, comfort zones can quietly become invisible prisons. That's the dangerous part, because the human brain adapts fast. The less social interaction you have, the more emotionally unfamiliar it becomes. And eventually, you're no longer staying home because you enjoy it. You're staying home because the outside world no longer feels emotionally safe. But here's the interesting thing. Most people who love staying home don't actually want isolation forever. What they usually want is peace. Real peace. Conversations that don't feel fake. People who don't drain them emotionally. Connection without performance. A place where they can exist without constantly managing how they're perceived. That's why many homebodies deeply value calm energy, quiet companionship, emotional intelligence, authenticity. They don't necessarily want more people. They want safer people. And maybe that's the real psychology behind people who love staying at home. It's not always loneliness. Sometimes it's relief. Relief from noise. Relief from pressure. Relief from pretending. Because after a while, peace becomes addictive. And once someone experiences a space where they can finally breathe emotionally, the outside world starts feeling very loud. Maybe too loud. And honestly, some people aren't hiding from life. They're just protecting the only version of themselves that still feels real.